It took me nearly 5 hours to find my way back to the dry, cracked earth of the landing site, and another 5 minutes to locate the light of the shuttle. The smoke and ash in the air had smothered the exterior lights, their glow barely as bright as my own. As I reached the rear of the ramp, I hit the controls and it pressed out into an airlock, confirming that they had been returned safely. The airlock was agonizingly slow. I wanted in as fast as possible. The din and smell, even greatly reduced as they were getting to me. As soon as the outer door began to open, I climbed through the gap and hit the cycle controls, the door closing once more and the air within rapidly clearing of the smoke, smell, and sound of this terrifying city. Finally, the interior door opened, revealing Lola alone in the shuttle. She was laying on the couch with her suit still on, though her helmet was laying discarded on the floor. The shuttle had cleaned its interior of ash and smell, back to the soft and organic styling it once had, though a trail of dirt had been left by Lola and Hayden's return, and indicating that he had left again. Though I'm not sure where he may have gone. Perhaps he was looking for me. I moved directly into the shower cubicle, stripping my clothes off as I washed. The water running from me was almost black with the dirt and smoke of the city. When the water was finally running clear, I stepped from the shower and dressed in some fresh attire. My actions had not disturbed Lola, who was still sleeping, though she seemed to be having dreams of an uncomfortable nature. Hardly a surprise after the walk through the city. Obtaining some food from the printer, I sat and ate, waiting for Hayden to return. It was another 2 hours before I heard the airlock opening once more, causing me to stand in anticipation. Hayden stepped into the shuttle and removed his stained helmet, wearing a look of relief. "You made it back," his voice carrying a sense of relief. But he turned his attention to Lola, heading for her side and trying to make her comfortable. "Were you out looking for me?" "The escort guided me back to the matriarch's chamber, but you had already left, so he brought me back." His attention was on Lola, stroking her behind the ear gently, which had a strong calming effect on her, the dreams settling down. After caring for Lola, he got some food and sat opposite me, asking me about the meeting and apologizing for his absence. I filled him in on what little she had said and suggested that we should get some rest. We may be waiting for some time, and I wanted to be rested for the next sojourn into the city. Sleep was not as restful as I'd hoped, my own dreams somewhat unsettling, the strange din of the city washing through my mind. In the dream, the din sounded like the voices of the Kraken, as though many hundreds of conversations were happening in my head. I fancied the conversations were about us, though not the friendly sort, somewhat vile, my dreams even conjuring a view of Hayden conspiring with the Kraken, hiding his light from me. I was finally awoken by Hayden, giving me a little shake and informing me the escort had returned. Gathering myself up, I noticed that Lola was now out of her suit and sleeping in one of the bunks, while Hayden had donned his suit once more, ready to accompany me back to the matriarch. Though I was better prepared for the city, the exit from the shuttle still struck me enough to stumble. Quickly righting myself, I turned to the escort and prepared to open a channel, but before I could, the escort turned and departed, Hayden glancing at me for a moment, then began to follow. Were they talking to him now? I began to walk after them, still unsure of Hayden and his connection with the Kraken. The journey was a different route, though the tattered ruins of the city were all much alike. The movement of the sleeping Kraken had changed the path, something I was already familiar with. Still, the walk was long, taking around 4 hours again, even walking through a long abandoned theatre on the journey. Our destination was the same, though, an open area where the burned remains of foliage and ruined rubble of statues stand. The chamber of the matriarch was still in the centre of this park, though it undulated more menacingly now. Even the entrance seemed to gnash at us as we entered.
The UNS is inviting war with these restrictions.
Came the shrieking voice of the matriarch, referring to the preservation laws that prevent the strip mining of planets in Sol. I had expected this hurdle and began to speak, explaining the law and its importance to the heritage of the system. Hayden frequently sending me graphs and details to support my dialogue. As before, the matriarch was silent throughout, though Hayden appeared to be coping with the environment better now. Even the matriarch's initial words had not staggered him as they had me. After my explanations, I fell silent, waiting for a response and preparing myself for its violent intensity. The matriarch remained silent for some time, undulating in a strange and frantic patterns, before finally speaking.
War is inevitable. Many seek to transform Venus, make it new Earth. Others wish to dissolve it.
Her voice echoing through the chamber more than it had before.
The preservation laws will ensure it is not dismantled. If you agree to become a UNS member, you can vote against terraforming.
Again, my reply was met with a long silence, though only relative to the noise of the city.
Kraken among the UNS will not prevent war. We will not fight for your goals. Why should we join?
The end of her sentence caused a frantic undulation within the chamber. Even the floor became unsteady, rippling from the walls to the centre and jostling us about. It did not settle after a few moments, growing worse as long as we remained. Quickly we made our way to the exit, my sprint carrying me 100 metres in a few moments, before I realised that Hayden was far slower. As I turned, I could see him still running, the lights of his suit bobbing up and down as he ran over the rippling surface. Then his lights rose high off the ground as he came into view. He was being carried by the escort. Moments after the escort left the area, the Kraken-composed ground, the entire structure, began to move, sending the smoke swirling away from it, allowing my glow to penetrate further through the dark. The chamber began to uncoil, becoming tentacles hundreds of meters long, as thick as the shuttle and bristling with gnashing plates. The entire chamber was not many Kraken, but one, as large as a destroyer-class ship. It rolled into the air, pushing away from the floor. The rush of wind pushed me to a ruined wall of a store at the edge of the park, before the monstrous form of the matriarch twisted into the sky and out of sight, smoke soon rushing back around me. The escort approached and deposited Hayden at my side before reaching out with an open channel, to which I quickly connected, hoping for an explanation of what happened. Was all I could hear over the din of his thoughts. Hayden and I gathered our wits and began to follow the escort, leading us back toward the shuttle down yet another route, though the journey was different this time. The whole city was vibrating, and the intensity of the noise had grown. Even dulled down, the sound was quickly cutting into my head, pounding under the beat of the Kraken. I frequently staggered and swayed, holding my head as it ached. Hayden was faring far better, moving to my side and offering assistance, which I was initially inclined to accept. But after a while of walking, I looked at his face, obscured by the grime and ash the atmosphere had deposited, but I could see he was distracted, as though engaged in conversations with someone. Even a smile for a moment crossed his face. He was talking to the Kraken. He'd made some deal or gained their favour. He was working against me, it was clear. Hayden and the Kraken were in league together, planning something. The din in my head was crushing me down, but he was fine, smiling as he made his deals. Pulling away from him, I stopped walking and turned to confront him. Hayden's face changed from pleased to confused. I began to yell, demanding answers. Why was he working with the Kraken? What had they offered him? Hayden tried to move towards me, but I pulled back. I wouldn't accept the help of this traitor. He wasn't even responding to my questions. I could feel my heart beating in my ears. The flush of my skin had turned my normally golden glow to a bronze colour. Still yelling, I shone brighter as my words hit high notes. Hayden had started backing off and waving his hands dismissively. He knew I was onto him, so I advanced, yelling my demands for answers. Why? Why have you betrayed me? Why? Why? Tell me! As I yelled, I shoved him hard. Hayden did not stumble backwards, the force of my shove causing him to be thrown back, tumbling head over heels. A moment of satisfaction crossed my face, watching him roll, but it was short-lived satisfaction, the tumble coming to an end as Hayden reached a chasm in the ground, disappearing over the edge. I ran over, looking down into its depths, but Hayden had not fallen far. He was just a few meters down. A shard of metal support piercing his suit and chest entirely. Steam pouring off the searing hot metal, the water of his blood boiling away. He was still twitching, but he was already dead. Backing away from the chasm, I couldn't believe it. I'd killed him. It was an accident, of course. I had no intention to kill him. I just wanted answers, but instead I was left without, shaking with rage and anguish, dropping to my knees in the realization that he couldn't hear me over the din of the city. I had not opened a channel. I had missed my chance to get those answers. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually I looked around. The escort had stopped when we did, still standing there silently, judgingly. I climbed to my feet and turned to the escort, trying to decide what to say, but he turned and continued the trip back to the shuttle. I followed. The events of this trip flowing through my mind, trying to make sense of Hayden's actions. Why would he betray me? What did the Kraken want with him as an ally? I couldn't find the answers. The din of the city and the pounding in my head, all making it difficult to think clearly. As we arrived at the shuttle, I realized the great wall that lay beside it had gone, as had the trembling of the city. The ground settled, and the landscape transformed. I opened the hatch and entered the airlock, still extended from its last use, the air clearing again and allowing me entry to the interior. Lola was waiting for me, standing on the other side of the door and wearing a look of fear and concern. "Where's Hayden?" The question was more accusatory than questioning. She must have known. She was part of it. It suddenly became clear to me. She was alone for hours. It was her. It was Lola. In my rage, I turned and tore through the outer airlock door, getting clear of the shuttle and running, the ground rushing under my feet. I must have run for an hour, searching for the matriarch. I would have answers. I needed answers, and she was going to give them to me. My run was fruitless, ending only when I found myself back at the shuttle, its faint light drawing me in. The rear door was twisted from my exit, no longer able to hold out the atmosphere. As I came to it, I could see the inner doors, closed, but through the transparency, I could see Lola laying on the ground, her fur and flesh burned by the brief blast of the atmosphere. She was not moving. I'd killed her too. I sat by the shuttle, stunned by the events of the last few hours. My head still ached from the noise, smell, and voices of the Kraken. It was the Kraken. They were the ones responsible. There's no way that my assistants would have turned, not without the sensory onslaught of this city and its inhabitants. Armed with my new realization, I opened the inner door of the shuttle. The heat of the air began to cook Lola's remains, the stench of the city hiding the smell. Quickly, I went to work, setting the shuttle's flight path and blinding it before making my escape. The shuttle taking to the air moments after I departed. Its course would take it to the heart of the city and crash into the ground, but it would not destroy this place. I would have to do more, so I broke into a run, avoiding Kraken on my path, and dealing whatever meagre damage I could to this place. After some time, the Kraken finally cornered me, so I was left no choice but to fight. My android body was strong and tough, making me more than a match for them individually. Grabbing one and pulling its tentacles off one by one, they piled in, and I was caught. Soon they would kill me, and the UNS would destroy them. I awoke some time later, lying on a soft bed, the sun shining on me, back in my organic body. The view from the window was one of the earth, blue sky and green grass, trees scattered across the grounds of the hospital.